Welcome, welcome, welcome everyone to Sister Wives with Mary Jane Kay. Today, I'll be giving my commentary on Sister Wives, Season 16, Episode 6, No Head Wife. Before I get into the episode, I wanted to mention a few things that you guys might find interesting. So let's talk about kidneys for a second. As you guys know, in the Season 17 trailer, Cody mentions how he felt as if he was being knifed in the kidneys. And I wondered, why the kidneys? Why not the heart when talking about his wives? At first I thought perhaps because Cody had mentioned that Christine blamed him for what happened with Truly with her kidney failure. And so somehow that maybe flew out of his mouth. But Diana, a viewer of mine who is incredibly knowledgeable about religion, and she's very knowledgeable with the Old Testament, made a point to mention to me, she commented so helpfully, by the way, that the kidneys are the center of emotional life in the Old Testament. They're considered the core of a person and the most vulnerable part of them. I wanted to do just a little bit of research, so I found a paper on PubMed, the metaphorical and mythical use of the kidney in antiquity. And the kidneys are associated with the most inner stirrings of emotional life in the Old Testament. The kidneys are the seat for our secret thoughts, and they are often used as a metaphor for moral discernment, reflection, and inspiration. And they're viewed as a life center. So many thanks to Diana, mystery solved, as to why Cody said that he was stabbed in the kidneys and not the heart. Also, last episode, Mary said she made a conscious choice to stay. We know Mary mentions that she holds on for Saul and Ari because they mean a ton to her. And you can tell Mary unconditionally loves those kids. We also know Cody has made it clear he will never ever have more than a cordial acquaintance type of relationship with Mary. And Mary says she hopes for more, but deep down she knows it's not happening. So why the conscious choice to stay? Is it just because Mary's identity is deeply based in her being a part of this family? And she fears that if she left, she would lose her family and a large part of her identity. Or is this about faith for Mary? In the FLDS religion, you are sealed to your family, who will go to the same area of heaven, supposedly to their own planet if they live polygamy and they play their cards right. If Mary divorced Cody, it would mean she would no longer be able to join her family in the afterlife. And the whole goal of all of this, the end goal of living this way, if you're part of the faith, is getting to the right tier of heaven and populating a planet in heaven with your family and all of the kids. So if Mary doesn't stick this out in the afterlife, she won't be with the Brown family. She may not be with Leo or with the rest of her family if she chooses to get a spiritual divorce. And maybe that has a lot to do with why she stays. I don't know, of course, it's all just speculation. And of course, I don't know if Cody and the wives that he still has participate in their church or if they're still members of their faith. We know Christine left and she didn't bother to handle her divorce spiritually through the church because last tell-all she said she doesn't believe anymore. But for Mary, if she believes and she knows forever, for eternity in the afterlife, she won't be with her family and her child, I could understand the weight of that and the pull of that if she believes fervently. If the Browns are still members of their church, that is. Maybe that's why Mary sticks this all out. I want to again thank Diana, who so graciously explained such a complicated concept so well to me. There's more to this, of course, and one day I look forward to doing the episode on the faith that's still in the works because I feel there is a lot that we can understand about the dynamics and about why the Brown adults chose to structure their family this way if we understand the faith that was the basis for that decision. Anyways, on to the episode, Season 16, Episode 6, No Head Wife. The episode opens with Mary in a very posed scene, staring pensively off into the distance, looking very heavy in thought and burdened by the complexities of her life. The whole scene looks very staged to me. She's in a residential neighborhood, leaning on a stone wall, staring off in the distance, but we don't see what she is admiring. But TLC flashes to the typical downtown view of Flagstaff that they always show whenever they want to signify that the Browns are out and about in town. Mary lets us know what's on her mind with a voiceover. She thinks that after they moved to Flagstaff, all of them were seeing fractures in the family culture. And then COVID hit, and that magnified it. It's been a rough couple of years. Robin has on heavy-duty protective glasses as she aggressively uses a weed whacker in a blouse with her hair done, full makeup on, whacking those weeds between the cracks in her driveway. It looks like it's totally for show. Robin says it's taken a toll on their family culture. There are these little tension points, and she and her kids are really feeling that, and they are tired of it. Christine says it's put a strain on things. And most of the conversations revolve around COVID, and it's exhausting. And Cody is the only one who moves from house to house. So it's done a lot to their psyche. Mary says they definitely aren't seeing each other, and there is no protocol in place so that they can see each other. Mary is reading a book in the tackiest butterfly shirt I have ever seen. It's probably a Lula Craft shirt. It's white with a zillion monarch butterflies all over it. It's so busy, it makes one dizzy to look at. I like butterflies too, but I don't want to wear a shirt that looks like butterflies have vomited all over me. The book Mary is reading is by Dr. Gary Waller. We don't see the title, but I did a little research. I'm always curious, of course. And if it's the right Dr. Gary Waller, he writes about English literary culture. He's a well-known professor. And Mary may just be curious, but most of the doctor's books are required in college courses. And he also analyzes some areas of the Bible as well. So it makes me wonder if Mary might be going back to school, or if she is just super inquisitive. Either way, reading is always amazing. I love to read myself. Janelle is raking leaves, and it doesn't look staged. She actually looks like she's legit raking these leaves. And I'm not surprised that Janelle isn't faking her scene, because Janelle is the most practical. So I doubt she has patience to stage things too often. She says she thinks COVID has been the hardest thing they have ever faced as far as wrecking their family culture. Janelle worries the longer this goes on, that they may not recover. My thoughts have always been that the risk of COVID or getting COVID and most likely surviving it would be much less damaging to the family and the relationships in the family than the way Cody insists on handling COVID within the family with his protocols. I'm not saying you can't pass from COVID or that it's not serious. Of course it is. But they are one family, and they can manage this in a way where everyone is reasonable and as safe as possible while still interacting on some level. Wear masks, hand sanitize, be cautious, of course. But the way they are handling COVID is way more damaging to the relationships and the family as a whole than COVID ever would be. They are a family of 20-something people. Logically, someone will probably, unfortunately, get the Rona statistically. And if they do get it, God forbid, which they unfortunately do, that would be far less damaging than Cody's protocols are to the family, in my opinion. Let's also keep in mind that Cody and Robin, the people most rigid and insistent about Cody's protocols, still allowed a nanny in who was supposedly following Cody's protocols. And her hubby got sick, and then she got sick days before a family gathering was held at Robin's house for Ariella's birthday. Did Robin, Cody, and their kids bother to take rapid tests before Ari's party? I don't know, but they had the family over at Robin's house, and that was the point of exposure for the whole family. And people did get sick. and the nanny was allowed in, and Isabel was not allowed to visit Robin's house. And Christine wondered, what does the nanny do? What does she do that allows her to be in the king and queen's castle when Isabel is not allowed in during her recovery period? Cody's protocols don't work, and Cody made them impossible to follow intentionally, in my opinion. And he and Robin and their household happened to be the point of exposure for the whole family, because I don't think they bothered to call the party off when they learned the nanny was sick and had just been over just a few days ago. And I don't think they bothered to take rapid tests pre-party either. And all season, Cody was rude and arrogant and condescending, bitching and moaning and whining like a woman scorned over his lax and irresponsible wives and kids who were so irresponsible and so risky for just living life and following CDC guidelines rather than his protocols. Cody created his own rules. And by the way, I don't think Robin really followed them to a T, because Janelle brought over a gift one day, and the rules specifically state that they are supposed to wipe down the outer box with alcohol, and then supposedly they're supposed to open it and wipe down the inner box, I think. And I don't know if it was to be left outside for a period of time or not first, but Robin just took the box straight from Janelle as is, no hesitation. And she didn't wipe it down. She just put it in her house directly. And by the way, that box wasn't just at Janelle's house. That box was shipped from some warehouse somewhere to Janelle's house, put in truck after truck to make it to Janelle's house, to make it to Robin's house. And Robin did not hesitate to just put that box in her house. So even Cody and Robin don't follow Cody's protocols. They just make them intentionally impossible and use them as an excuse to live monogamy and to justify Cody not giving equal time and investment to all his wives and kids. If this was just about COVID, why the fuck did Cody stop calling his kids when they needed him the most during a worldwide pandemic? Cody seems to want to play act at doing a lot of protecting of his family, when really he isn't there for his kids or his wives, unless of course they are the favorite wife and her kids, in my opinion. Can't even be there for his other kids. Communicate with his usual regular phone calls that he did pre-pandemic, because in his arrogance, his ego is bruised. Instead, Cody bitches and whines. He stews in resentment, distancing himself from everyone who doesn't cook a feast for his ego. Cody says Christine is back from New Jersey and he's going to go over to visit to touch base. Christine explains that they were away from home for 6 weeks and they got back from New Jersey a week ago. This is the first time that she and Cody were able to have a face-to-face conversation about Isabel's surgery, which is the most major thing in her life so far. Cody contributed to making a life with Christine, and as Isabel's father, his job is to protect her and to be there for her at all costs, good and bad, for the ups and downs of her life, for the emergencies, for the milestones, for the miracles. Yet Cody decided he didn't have to be there for Isabel for the most major thing in his daughter's life. Cody is such a protector. He talks incessantly about protecting his family from just the threat of COVID that may or may not happen. But when something major is going on, something that is definitely happening in reality, something major, something actual, something risky, something that can easily be life-threatening, Cody wasn't there protecting his daughter and supporting her. If you are a protector, is an actual, definite threat that is real and occurring in real time, not more pressing than a possible threat that may or may not occur, that there are precautions against, by the way. Cody says the COVID thing has wrecked a lot of experience for himself and Christine. and he hopes that COVID will go away so they can get back in a normal relationship. COVID is not the cause for his rocky relationship with Christine or anyone else. Cody wants to blame the pandemic because it removes accountability from him. It's interesting that Cody says he hopes COVID will go away. That seems to be what Cody does with all of his problems. Bury his head in the sand, put his fingers in his ears and yell really loud so he doesn't have to hear it, look the other way, sweep it under the rug, because Cody just hopes things will go away if he just doesn't address them. That's the approach he has with his wives in conflict, and that's the approach he has with COVID too. Oh, I just hope it'll go away. But that's not how things work. Cody asks Christine how Isabel is doing. And Christine asked Isabel if she thinks that she is better every day, and Isabel told her no. It's still a lot of ups and downs, and still on some days, she is glad she had the surgery, but on other days, it's really tough. Christine tells Cody, who is looking down in shame, unable to make eye contact with her, that Isabel really missed him and that it was very hard for her. And Cody looks down still as he responds with shame. And he says, I know, I'm sorry, without even looking at her. Christine looks gorgeous, by the way. She is glowing. She has hoops on. She looks great. And I love how calm she is as she deals with Cody. She is shining like her light is so bright, and Cody has to look down in shame, avoiding looking at her because her light is way too bright for him. Christine tells Cody she was fine with Cody not there, but the doctor was shocked that Christine was there by herself. This is major surgery. Most people would find it absolutely unthinkable for a husband not to join his wife in support, or a father who would not be there for his daughter. It's abnormal for Cody to decide not to go while there is air in his lungs. It's absurd. So of course the doctor was shocked. Cody says there is no going back. In confessional, he adds that he wishes he could have been there. What was stopping him? Nothing. None of the reasons Cody gave hold any water. Nothing would against being there for your daughter during major surgery that could be life-threatening. And I think Robin probably had a hand in it, but at the end of the day, we all have our own free will and our own ability to make a choice. And none of Cody's reasons, none of any of the speculations we can make about why he didn't attend are justifiable reasons to not be there. These are Cody's high morals and ethics he gets from his faith. This is Cody's character. Cody says it's a real regret that he didn't go, so it has him going back in time, wishing he had done things differently. I would say hindsight is 20/20, but this isn't one of those experiences where you are young and you make a mistake and you look back later with more wisdom and maturity and you understand later about it. This is basic decency as a man and as a husband and a father and as a human being, that you would go to your daughter's surgery with your wife and be there. This is not something where there is a question even. This is not something where maturity gives you wisdom or hindsight. It's common decency. It's common sense. Your kid has major surgery. There is no option to not go. It's not even a choice. It's your job to be there as a father and as a husband. And you should want it no other way. It should be a fuck yeah, I'll be there, no doubt. There is no, well, I made a mistake. I thought about it. I'm more mature now. So in hindsight, I wish I went. This guy is in his 50s, but that's not necessarily his mental age or maturity level, in my opinion. We've seen amazing examples of intelligent and emotionally mature, self-aware members of the Brown family. Look at Cody's kids, for example. Cody has decades on them, but they seem to have more maturity than he does, and they're able to communicate at a more advanced level at their younger ages, and that's a testament to the mothers of the family, particularly Janelle, Christine, and Mary. Next, Cody says, if Isabel would hurry and recover, it would just make him feel so much better about it. Wow. WTF. So Cody feels ashamed. He feels guilt. He knows he didn't do right by Isabel and Christine, and he instead prioritized his own convenience instead of going to the surgery. And now he feels bad about it, and he wishes Isabel would just hurry up and recover so he can feel better about it for himself. See how selfish Cody is? See his character? He wants his daughter, who just had major surgery, who is struggling to recover, in pain every day, to hurry up and get better. Not so she isn't in pain, not so she heals, so he can feel better about not going to her surgery because he feels bad, so he blames Isabel for feeling bad and for feeling guilty about his wrong decision not to go with her to surgery, where any normal, decent human would have been. So Isabel's pesky long recovery and her pesky suffering, Cody doesn't want it to end, so he knows his daughter is happy and healed and pain-free. It's all about him. It's so he doesn't have to feel bad about it for that much longer, so it can all be over because it hurts his ego too much. Everything is selfish. Everything is about how it affects Cody and about Cody's ego. I don't hear Cody saying, I hope Isabel heals soon. I don't want her to hurt. I don't see him pitching in to help her recover or helping with the meds. In fact, Isabel wanted to spend time at Robin's house with her siblings during recovery and with her dad for a little moral support. And she was not allowed, but the nanny was. Nothing is about his daughter and what she goes through, how she hurts, not just physically, but emotionally as well, because he didn't attend the surgery. In fact, instead of helping, Cody caused more pain and trouble and difficulty for Isabel, making it harder because his daughter had to wrap her mind around not mattering enough for her father to sacrifice to be there for her in the scariest moment of her life. She also had to cope with wanting her dad there above all else and him not being around, and also not being welcome to spend time with her dad at Robin's house because of the COVID protocols. Why wasn't Isabel welcomed? Why was she treated like a second-class citizen in her own family? Cody tells Christine he doesn't want Isabel resenting him all of her life because he was not there for her when she needed him the most. Christine makes a face like she can't believe Cody is so selfish that he worries about how his bad behavior will affect him, will affect how Isabel feels about him. None of it is about Isabel's feelings. It's mostly about how Cody doesn't want Isabel to resent him because it's not good for him and his ego. It's not about the pain he caused to Isabel. Christine hopes Isabel won't resent her dad as well. And Cody says in confessional that he hopes there is a lot of forgiveness. But he says he should have been there for her operation. Cody asks, how is she going to feel about that all of her life? Maybe Kotex should have thought of that before deciding not to be there. His absence made it clear that he doesn't give a fuck about Isabel's feelings. He only is mentioning it now as an afterthought because he is more concerned with catching flack for it or how Isabel won't revere him as much as she may have previously. He is worried about how his bad choice affects him and how the repercussions of that bad choice affect him. Not how it affects Isabel. Not how Isabel had to wrap her mind around her dad not being there, not mattering enough to him for him to sacrifice to be there, and recovering and going through immense physical pain. He caused her more hardship, not less. Now he's worried about how his bad choice is going to affect him. He doesn't seem to mention Isabel's feelings too much other than he doesn't want to be resented by her. Christine asks Cody if it wasn't for COVID, would he be there? Of course, Cody says, yeah, of course. If it wasn't for COVID, he would have gone. I don't know about that. Of course, he is saying this because he made his main reasons for not going to this surgery be COVID, fear of COVID, looking like a hypocrite for deviating from his protocols in order to attend the surgery. He mentioned not being away from the family for too long, mainly Robin's family, since he lived there in monogamy for 9 to 10 months during the pandemic. And he also mentioned protecting the family because Isabel isn't the only child the family has. And also, he did mention that he has a rocky relationship with Christine right now. So, of course, he has to say if it wasn't for COVID, he'd be there. But I really don't know about that. I want to point out that Cody says if it wasn't for COVID, he would have gone. But he did end up attending Janelle's mom's funeral, and he had to quarantine, and he had to be away from Robin and the kids. Cody was able to attend the funeral of his mother-in-law despite COVID. That was important enough for Cody to be there. Is it because Janelle had a better relationship with Cody than Cody has with Christine? Or is it that Janelle's mom and also his mother-in-law happens to also be his stepmom and the sister wife to his own mom? So he had to be there for his mom's sake, maybe. Why did this funeral take precedence over COVID and Cody's fear and his protocols? Yet Isabel's surgery did not. Cody had to quarantine after that funeral, and we saw the footage of him, scared shitless, waiting for his COVID test results. He was so antsy, it looked like he was seated on hot coals during that scene, because he promised Robin he would be there and that he wouldn't get the Rona. He was so relieved when he got that test result because he knew he would be in the doghouse big time if he didn't keep his word to Robin, because she doesn't like her kids being away from Cody for more than a few days. Otherwise, it's too traumatic and they get too agitated. But it was okay for Isabel to experience significant agitation when her dad could not be there with her during a life-threatening major surgery. And she will remember his absence her whole life. When Robin's kids won't remember if their dad was away for a week or two or even a month in the long run. It won't affect them, but this will always affect Isabel. Cody tells Christine his biggest concern is how they go forward because they can't keep living like this. Cody says it's really important that she and her kids go back to a social distance quasi-quarantine system so he can start coming over and start being at her house. Cody says he is at a point now where he needs her. And Christine cuts in and she asks if Cody means for her and the kids to stop going places and living life. And Cody says yeah, and he laughs cynically and he tells Christine he needs people to stop coming to her house. And Christine says it would be great to have him there more, but he is there a couple times a week. And if they go somewhere where someone wants to hang out with them, like when they go to visit Aspen and Mitch, the girls are around people all the time who welcome them, who are excited to see them. Cody shifts in his seat and Christine instructs him to finish listening. And Cody frowns like a scolded 5-year-old yelled at in class to sit still and pay attention. Yet, interestingly, he sits. Christine says when they go places, they are so excited to see them. They hang out with them all the time, whereas they just see Cody maybe a couple times a week. Cody says when he called Gwendolyn, she was out with a friend, and he complains that Tony and McKelty come over. And Christine explains that's because they are quarantined from him anyways, and they only see him twice a week anyways. So she asks, who the hell cares? Go, Christine. Cody says he is there twice a week, but that was 4 days. And Christine says no, it wasn't 3 or 4 days. It was just Cody coming twice a week. And again, Cody insists it's 3 or 4 days. And Christine reiterates it was just twice a week. And Cody again insists that it was 3 to 4 days. And Christine says, okay, whatever semantics, very dismissively. She is done taking shit from Kotex, and I love it. Cody just looks down defeatedly after Christine scolds him, and I absolutely am loving it. Robin, helping Cody spin his ridiculous narrative, says in confessional that Cody's actual time that he spends in each home is pretty equal pre-COVID, and then since COVID, it has really been about the behaviors of each household. Cody all season has been demeaning his wives and kids and stressing how lax and lazy and irresponsible they are when it comes to COVID. And he deflects about why he can't be there, blaming his wives and kids who don't follow his COVID protocols, saying that's the reason why he can't be there. That's the reason why he can't do things fairly, giving equal time to each branch of his family. And Robin backs Cody up, saying the amount of time Cody can spend elsewhere depends on how each household behaves and whether they follow his guidelines or not. So Robin can assist Cody in justifying his bad behavior. So she isn't living monogamy with Cody because she is the favorite wife. She is living monogamy because she is the wife following Cody's protocols, according to her. She is the one obeying him, so she gets the luxury of Cody's time. What about Mary? Mary also follows Cody's protocols. She gets zero time, attention, or communication from Cody or from Robin when they know she is risk-free. Cody deemed her as safe, yet Robin and Cody have yet to even allow Mary over. Cody says the rotation they have with his schedule pre-COVID was basically 2 nights at Janelle's, 2 nights at Christine's, and 2 nights at Robin's. And he rotated that way. And Mary wasn't in the rotation because he and Mary aren't in that kind of relationship. He says they're in a state of friendship. Cody says basically that was his schedule. Why add basically? Was it because there were more times when Cody took liberties with that schedule? If that was his schedule usually most of the time pre-COVID, would Cody add the word basically to that? Cody does what he likes, even with the rotation and the time he gives each wife instead of kids. Remember when Cody switched the rotation order because he wanted to stay at the RV park and not at the hotel in an episode when his turn was with a wife that was staying at the hotel? And when his wives weren't all happy with that, he threatened them with, let's keep this a fun vacation. Let's keep my mood good. He said when dictating that he would change the rotation to suit his preference, listen, ladies, you don't want me to go to that place where I don't give a shit, or we'll have a bad trip. He's smiling, but he warns them, we'll have a bad trip, and I'm having a good trip right now. So Cody probably says basically because he knows that's not the regular schedule most of the time, in my opinion. Or maybe it should be, but maybe Cody doesn't keep to that most of the time. To me, when people add extra words like usually, normally, most of the time, when it's not needed to qualify it, it's because they're trying to be convincing and they're also trying to convince themselves that that's how it is when it's not that way. But maybe I just watch too much true crime and body language and verbal analysis content. I don't know. Also, did Cody need to mention that Mary isn't in the rotation when that's obvious, and then further stick the knife in by explaining they aren't in that type of relationship? They're in a state of friendship, whatever that means. We all are well aware that Cody and Mary are estranged. We are all well aware how much Cody resents Mary. We know the drill, and Mary does too. So why does Cody go out of his way to be cruel and mention it? He seems to enjoy mentioning that he and Mary are not together in that way every chance he gets. He always says they are just friends. He even once told a reporter that they weren't intimate anymore for no reason other than he was in Mary's presence and he wanted to stick the knife in and twist when he knows it hurts her. Cody wants to hurt her because his ego gets off on it, like some type of revenge because of the catfish sitch. And he also wants to make it as inhospitable as possible for Mary to stay, in my opinion, because he can't divorce his wives. But they can always choose to leave him. But this is extra cruel when we consider that if Mary believes in her faith, she believes that if she leaves, she won't be in the afterlife on the same planet with Leo and her whole family. She will be away from them in a lower tier of heaven or on a different planet perhaps, and she wouldn't want that, and maybe that's why she stays. So it's extra mean of Cody to rub Mary's nose in it every chance he gets if he knows she stays just to be with her child and her family in the afterlife. That's a very big part of their religion. Mary knows that Cody isn't going to change his tune with her. And Cody knows he made it clear. The only reason he mentions it incessantly is to hurt Mary. He gets a kick out of it. And that says a lot about Cody's character. If you hurt his precious ego, he will hold on to it like a dog with a bone. And he will twist the knife and enjoy seeing the distress. And that's toxic and that's weird and that speaks to Cody's character. I get that Cody feels resentment, but there is so much poison in Cody and he feeds off that energy because he is in such a negative state. He's resentful all the time. He's negative all the time. He takes this like a game. This is his family and he treats them as if they're against him, like he is the victim in this. He treats his family, his team, like they are on the opposing side when that's not the case. Janelle explains that pre-COVID, it was quicker. Cody would come for 1 or 2 days and he'd go on and come back. And now the time in the rotations is stretched out of necessity. Cody will come and he'll stay longer and then he's gone for longer. And Janelle thinks that makes sense. Cody says Christine is complaining that he was never around. And he doesn't know what she is talking about. He says he was around until Christine started going out of town. Christine says this is where she and Cody disagree most fundamentally all of the time. She says Cody would come over at 5 o'clock at night. He would have dinner with them. He would be on his phone constantly, watch a movie, and then they would all go to bed. And the next morning, Cody was gone, even before the girls woke up. Christine asks, why can't Cody come over and spend a couple of days with them? Whole days. She says she knows Cody is somewhere for whole days, basically meaning at Robin's. Christine tells Cody that hanging out with him isn't enough for her girls. Other people want to see them all of the time. And Cody says he doesn't get to see her because she is always on a vacation of some sort. Keep in mind that Cody calls Christine's trip to New Jersey for Isabel's major surgery a vacation when they quarantined, had surgery, recovered, and came home. Cody says it next. He says, in New Jersey, she was on a vacation. Christine just looks at Cody like she doesn't even say words. How the fuck is quarantining and doing a major life-threatening surgery with her daughter in ICU recovering, the surgery was so serious, and then having to recover at her sister's house to be able to fly home? How is that a vacation? Would any of you guys call that a vacation? Cody is such a fucking loser. He knows he lost this argument, so he wants to come up with bullshit, and he sticks his foot in it every fucking time. In confessional, Cody says they prefer to do things with other people rather than to make it possible for him to be at home with them. Cody asks, how does that play out long term in a relationship? My question is, how does the damage to the family dynamics Cody is creating with the way he wants to dictate his protocols on everyone, how does that play out long term in the relationship of the whole family? How does saying his family is an obstacle to his goals in life play out long term in the family relationship and the family dynamics? Cody wants to blame Christine for not following his ridiculous protocols that basically require you to live in your house 24/7, never leaving under permanent quarantine, just so he can come by for a few nights, create tension, and make everybody feel like they are walking on eggshells as he stews in bitterness, making it clear he's just there as a chore, barely dipping his toe in the water as far as his investment level and presence while he's there. No one wants to be around Cody or his energy. It's not pleasant. And he wants to blame Christine that she is not obeying him and his protocols just to sit and walk on eggshells and tolerate his negative energy when he treats being there like a chore. He's negative and he isn't fully invested. It's not a good experience when Cody comes over. So Christine prefers to follow CDC guidelines like any logical person would, and she prefers to go where she is loved and welcomed and appreciated. And it's no wonder Cody's wives don't choose him over other people. His presence would be annoying and stressful. Anyways, no one likes an emotionally lazy, bitter, negative Nancy who is critical and whiny around. Why would that be fun? Why would these women change their whole lives and their whole way of living to suit Cody's protocols he wants to dictate on them just to experience Cody's tension, resentment, and negativity when there are people who are more than happy to see them, who would love to see them, that they don't have to walk on eggshells for or jump through unreasonable hoops to be able to see. It's not like Cody would be a joy to hang around. He seems like a killjoy. Cody says he has people in his family that aren't like that with him, and he doesn't have more to say about it. So he has people who stroke his ego and make him feel like he is the king of the family, and the people who don't view him as a king who can do no wrong, Cody resents. He wants to whine and bitch that he doesn't matter to his wives enough for them to obey his protocols so he can see them, but his wives don't matter to him. So why should he matter to them? Why should they sacrifice to have a night or two they could easily forego because it's such a negative energy with Cody, and Cody is basically there phoning it in. He's not fully present. He doesn't seem to be fully invested, and his wives and his kids deserve better from him. I think it bashes Cody's ego that his wives wouldn't readily pick him above anyone or anything else, but would he pick them above anyone else? Would he pick his wives other than maybe Robin as a priority above himself? Would Cody change how he lives in order to suit them and their preferences, even under the worst of circumstances? Cody wants from his wives what he has never given them. And he also wants to come above his kids on the list of priorities to his wives. Cody feels entitled to this from his wives when he has done nothing to indicate that he deserves it. And also what I find interesting is the Browns say they're a democracy. But if you look at the math and you look at the numbers, more people have voted to not do Cody's protocols and to follow CDC guidelines than who have agreed to do the protocols. Mary only agrees to do the protocols because there's no other choice. But if they actually took a Democratic vote, I think the CDC guidelines would win out. But would Cody and Robin honor that if they vote on how to do things? I don't think so. They're going to insist on being authoritative and doing things this way. Cody expects his wives to jump through these hoops, to be eager to do this, to make him a priority even above their own kids. And he really is expecting from them what he has never given them. And he feels entitled to that. But really, when has he ever made his wives feel like they're a priority? That he would sacrifice for them, that he would jump through hoops for them. Cody bitterly tells Christine that everybody has to make a choice about whether he is supposed to be involved in their lives or whether they're going to go on vacation. The trip to New Jersey for Isabel's surgery, again, was not a vacation by anyone's standards. Cody wants to dismiss it as a vacation to make himself feel better about not going and try and justify his bad behavior to himself rather than taking accountability like a decent man would. He wants to make Christine look really irresponsible by saying that Christine isn't taking into consideration that Truly had kidney failure when she was 3 years old. He says COVID-19 is anomalous. We don't understand it, but they are saying that it's attacking kidneys, it's attacking lungs. Truly had kidney failure, so there's a chance, he says, that she could be at high risk. Here, Cody tells Christine, frustratedly, that it's been 6 months of, oh, Dad, this is a dumb idea. Oh, Dad, this isn't fair to us. Oh, Dad. And Cody says all they would have to do is change their behavior. Christine tells Cody that's so nebulous. Christine says, do you know what Cody really means? Misbehavior. Your misbehavior needs to be managed. She says Cody thinks what she is doing is misbehavior. Christine points out it's not actually safe to drive a car. People get into car accidents all the time. But does that stop us from driving, she asks. Of course, she says no. And Cody tells Christine he feels slighted by this entire thing. Christine tells Cody it's his decision. The whole COVID quarantine, meaning according to Cody's protocols, permanently quarantining at home, living only in your house, not a 2-week quarantine to be safe like the CDC recommends. Cody's decision to take up these protocols and to force them on everybody was his decision. Cody says they all agreed to this so that he could see everybody. And Christine explains that they agreed to this 6 months ago. Christine tells Cody she thinks it's ridiculous that they are socially distancing still. And Janelle explains at her house, they mask when they're out and they hand sanitize. They stay socially distanced when out and about in public. Robin says at her house, they do what everybody does, which is wear a mask, they socially distance, they hand sanitize a lot, but they still do extra stuff to protect them from spreading COVID around to the rest of the family. The biggest thing that they do is that Cody is the only one going from house to house. So that includes anybody else, like all of their friends and their family. They don't have visitors at Robin's house and they don't go and visit people. But the nanny's okay, of course. Cody says the bottom line is that Christine's values are different from his about this, and Christine's desire to have him in her life is very different than Robin's, Cody says. Cody says Robin will do anything so that he can be home. So Robin has sequestered her children. Cody says Christine has always gotten mad at him about pushing for this big picture in the family. But on the other hand, Robin has always been the one who has supported the big picture of the family. What is Cody smoking? Let me tell you something. When Robin came in the family, the dynamic changed. And it's my opinion that the dynamic changed because all of the wives, the original wives in Cody, Christine, Mary, Janelle, Cody, when they were just a family, they all prioritized the family over themselves, their needs, their wants, their individual relationships, their marriages. It was all about the group. Then Robin came in and she was more interested in her marriage, having a romantic relationship, her husband. So she prioritized her marriage. She prioritized Cody. She prioritized herself over the family. And Cody saw that. It felt good for him. It felt good for his ego. And he started prioritizing Robin as well. And of course, he was whipped. So that's when the dynamics of the family started to change, when not all the adults in the family shared the same priority, in my opinion. So this is utter bullshit about Robin being the one who has supported the big picture of the family and Christine has been the one that's so against it and angry at him for pushing it. That's not the case. That may be how Cody wants to spin it and how he perceives it, but that's not the case. Christine was the heart of the Brown family. and Christine was the caregiver and the nurturer of the group. She raised all of those kids, most of them all at the same time, and she did it with no help. And when she was overwhelmed, she went to her husband, Cody, asking for help, saying she's overwhelmed. And he told her, you don't get any help. You're shit out of luck. You signed up for this. So Cody doesn't get to say that Christine has been angry at him and she has pushed back and she hasn't supported the big picture of the family, yet Robin has. What the fuck? That is utter bullshit. Christine tells Cody she doesn't understand the difference at all with her just going and doing the shopping and wearing her mask and coming home if she is the only one leaving the house. She says it's the same as the nanny Cody and Robin have over. Cody explains that he and Robin have an employee who they call a nanny who comes over, and she helps in caring for the kids and she helps with schooling the kids. I just want to point out that, again, when Christine asked for help, Cody told her she wasn't getting any help, and Christine was able to raise 7 kids at a time at least, and she raised her kids and Janelle's kids while Janelle was at work, and she even helped with Leo as well, I believe. Christine was overwhelmed. Cody told her she could get no help. So now Robin has 3 adult kids who live at home. She has 2 little ones. One, I believe, is elementary school age. The other one is maybe 5th grade, maybe starting junior high. I don't really know, but they're old enough. There's Robin in the house, plus her 3 adult kids, plus Cody a lot of the time. What does she need the nanny for? How come Christine was able to raise 7 kids at a time and do such a beautiful job, and Robin needs help with 2 little ones with 3 adult kids in the house and herself and Cody? What does she need the nanny for? Why did she get help? Why did she get a nanny when Christine didn't and she had more kids to raise and deal with? I really view Christine as the heart of the family, and I think she's a phenomenal nurturer and a caregiver, and she loves all the Brown family kids unconditionally with all her heart, and you can really see that and you can feel that, and you can see what a beautiful job she did with how mature and independent and self-reliant and responsible all the kids are in their adult lives. Christine tells Cody the nanny is over all of the time, so she doesn't go anywhere. The nanny's husband is the only one who goes out and who does all the shopping. So Christine doesn't understand why Isabel can't come over to Robin's and hang out. She says Isabel is devastated. Christine asks in confessional, what is the nanny and her husband doing that makes it so they can come over? Because when she is home, she does exactly what she should, yet her girls can't see their siblings. Christine asks iconically, what does the nanny do? And she makes a mind-blown gesture. Christine says they're all as safe as can be, and she thinks it's time to lift the COVID restrictions. Cody sounds like a petulant child. He says Christine is not keeping the same rules. She's not doing the same thing. He says Christine is so full of bullshit. No, Cody is the one so full of bullshit that it's coming out of his ears. He couldn't be there for his daughter's surgery, and he can't even have the decency to allow Isabel over to spend some time with him and her other siblings during her difficult healing process. And Isabel knows the nanny is allowed in and she isn't. So there is no difference between allowing the nanny in or Isabel. Isabel isn't welcome because Cody doesn't want her there, or she would be welcome. That's so cruel and unfair to do to Isabel and to do to all of Cody's kids, who should always have full access to their father. Is fear of something that may or may not happen, that you will most likely live through, worth all the damage to every single relationship this man has with every child and every wife? Is it really fear of COVID holding Cody back? Or is it that he hates and resents his family? He sees them as a burden now, as an obstacle to his happiness and an obstacle to his goals in life. Cody needs to own his choice to marry 4 wives and to have a tribe of kids. and he needs to hold up his end of the agreement as a husband and a father who signed up for this. But now, when it's no longer convenient, when it means effort and inconvenience, and monogamy with Robin is just so much easier for him, Cody would rather be a coward, and he would rather be manipulative and destroy every relationship he has to make that his reality, because Cody is selfish. Cody comes first. His ego is heavy, and he spends all his time and energy lifting it up, carrying the weight of his arrogance rather than being a decent father and a husband. Sad, sorry, lonely little Cody. It must be exhausting to be him. Christine tells Cody it's been 6 months and they are not doing well. She needs a guarantee from Cody that they are really getting together as a family for Thanksgiving. Otherwise, she is leaving. Cody says they're going to figure this out tomorrow, and he is staring down, unable to look Christine in the eye. And he tells Christine, let's bring the family to a consensus on what we're doing. Cody says they're at an impasse, they disagree, and he is done with the conversation. He does a gesture of washing his hands of it, and he says he is done. He says he and Christine aren't making any progress here, and he is hoping that tomorrow he can come back and maintain his argument or maybe get some backup. The only wives who will back him will be Robin and perhaps Mary if she feels it will gain her more grace with Cody. And if Robin chimes in to back up her man, it will only create more animosity in both Christine and Janelle. I wouldn't go that route, but Cody doesn't seem to think things through. He thinks about winning everything. Everything is a game, and anyone not willing to blindly obey him is his opponent. And that's why Cody doesn't ever win, because Cody is his own worst enemy, and he views everyone around him as people who are against him, people in the way of him, people he needs to manage, when everyone is actually on the same team. And just because they happen to prefer to do things differently than he does, it doesn't mean it's a personal affront to Cody. But Cody takes everything that way. Everything is personal if it's not a complete ego feast. When Cody leaves, Christine rolls her eyes. She is done with him. Christine says she doesn't know if Cody even really wants to see everybody all together again. She is worried about that, but she thinks maybe Cody is just fine with everyone living so separately. Cody thinks it would be great if everybody maintained their COVID protocols so they can all be together. He says it would be awesome, but so far there are no indicators that everybody is willing to do that. Cody says what they have is a fundamental breakdown of trust in the family. Everyone is gathering now at Christine's house. Tony and McKelty are visiting, and they have a big plan to tell the family if they will be having a baby boy or a baby girl. McKelty is 4 months pregnant, and they're doing a home birth with a midwife. Tony points out that was all McKelty's idea. It's not him at all. McKelty says Tony is just worried about the medical complications. Just the small things, she says. And Tony says it's nothing strange. It's not like they cut women open to get babies out. Christine says Tony is not team home birth. He isn't thrilled about it. Cody says Tony is worried about it because he hasn't had the experience or the information about it yet. Cody says by the time he had his 10th home birth, it's very painful, but it's very natural. He got used to it. Janelle loves it. She thinks home births are awesome. So she had 3 kids at home and 3 in the hospital. Mary had a home birth with Leo when they were 12. Mary got pregnant again, and she ultimately lost that baby. But her plan was to do a hospital birth with that baby. Robin loves that McKelty wants to have a home birth. She says anybody she can convince to do that, and she feels like she won. After having so many kids, Cody is still a home birth advocate. but he still thinks it has to do with your doctor and their advice. He and Christine had one hospital birth with Truly, and it was a marvelous experience. McKelty and Tony are staying in a hotel, and they'll hang around Christine and her kids, but they won't come in close contact with anybody else there. So everyone else in the family will be socially distanced from them. Cody is wearing a mask outside. He's, I think, the only one wearing a mask. He's not feeling like he needs to, but he's wearing it as a reminder to everybody else to social distance, and he is trying to keep everyone being careful because he doesn't want to deal with this virus. Cody does get COVID, though, and from the nanny. So despite missing his daughter's most major emergency in her life, the scariest moment of her life, and despite ruining his family dynamics and the relationship he had with his whole family over trying to dictate COVID protocols, Cody still got COVID. And guess what? He lived through it, as did everyone else. So Cody and his dictatorial behavior and his demand that people follow his protocols or he will disengage really only hurt him and his relationships with his whole family. It didn't prevent COVID at all, and the family got COVID. Some of the family at least. And they got COVID after going to Robin's, which ironically, after all of this hell, was the actual point of exposure for his family after the nanny got COVID from her husband. And he shamed his family for being so lax, for being so risky and so irresponsible all season when he was actually the point of exposure, and Robin as well in her house. Tony and McKelty are making elephant toothpaste, and the color will reveal the baby's sex. Elephant toothpaste is a chemical combination that when mixed together, they explode and foam over. If it's pink foam, it's a girl. If it's blue, it's a boy. Cody wonders, was this well planned? Is this really well thought out? Is this going to backfire? Will it turn the correct color? Who the fuck cares as long as it's fun? Janelle will give Tony and McKelty credit for something unique that they haven't done yet in the family. So this is fun for Janelle, even if it doesn't work as planned. It's fun for the whole family, like a science project, and the family gets to be together. So in the end, it doesn't really matter if it works out perfectly or not if everyone had fun. Cody says it looks like a science experiment. It's a gender explosion coming out of this bucket, and he has no idea what the sex is because they didn't use enough dye. Robin doesn't know what the sex of the baby is right now. She says it's confusing. Cody asks if it's pink. Mary thinks it looks way more pink than blue. Christine says it didn't work. The color is just yeasty. Christine has a pink shirt on with a sign pinned to it saying it's a girl, and she reveals this just in case as a backup plan. Mom to the rescue. Christine is happy to be having another granddaughter. She's excited. She says Tony and McKelty will be awesome parents. Cody is excited that Tony and McKelty are having a girl. Robin says now they're going to have 2 granddaughters and 1 grandson, so it's awesome. Mary is super excited for Tony and McKelty as well. McKelty gets foam on Tony, and Isabel can't participate. So Christine gets pink frosting on Tony's face in her honor. Tony threatened to smash Isabel's face with a cupcake, and she can't do any kind of retribution right now because she's healing. So Christine is generously defending Isabel out of the kindness of her heart by smashing a cupcake with pink frosting in Tony's face. McKelty and Tony are doing fabulously. They communicate so well. They talk all of the time. And Christine says she gets to see them together, and she says they're incredible for each other and they will make fantastic parents. She says they'll be insane and fun and fantastic. All the adults are heading over to Mary's now. Robin says that Cody has come up with specific detailed rules about how they can get together as a family. Are these rules Cody's rules or Robin's rules, or a combination of both of them that they are trying to impose on the whole family? I love how Robin says Cody came up with it. I think she has a lot to do with it too. A couple of days ago, Christine told Cody she thinks it's insanely strange that Robin's nanny can come over and babysit and go inside the house, and they can be around the nanny, but they can't come over. Christine says it would be helpful if they could know what the nanny is doing, and maybe then they can all do that and they can all hang out together with each other. Mary says they basically have quarantined from each other for the past 6 months, and Mary isn't willing to sit 6 feet away from each other for Christmas or Thanksgiving. Janelle says it's a source of frustration to her that they continue to not agree on social distancing and rules, and she just wants to run away because she is getting really frustrated with this. Janelle wants to work out holidays. Christine is glad they're revisiting this, and she hopes they can revisit social distancing a bit. Cody has a sour, grumpy face before the meeting even starts. In confessional, Christine says that this isn't how a family is. Families don't social distance, and they aren't being a family right now. Robin says they have needed to get this figured out for months. Cody addresses the group. He tells the group that Christine was asking why their nanny was able to hang out with their kids and none of the other kids could. So Cody wrote down the rules they have for their nanny. Christine wants to look over the rules. She would love to see them. Cody mentions he sanitized his hands before passing out the rules to each wife, as if anyone cares at this moment. He asks Robin if she wants one of these as he passes out the rules to each wife he printed out. Mary jokes, addressing Robin, telling her these are the rules that you made up. Mary is laughing. She basically was saying, why would Robin need her own list of rules when she already knows them and she already abides by them? And Robin takes it very seriously, and she says she didn't make them up. And Mary tells Robin she was just teasing. And Robin says no, she didn't make up the rules, and she is pissed at Mary. She isn't laughing. She's very serious. Janelle looks at the rules and she asks, wow, are these the rules you guys follow at your house? Robin announces that she is just going to say out loud that she knows everybody is suspicious of her. She asks everyone to please stop. She demands just don't be suspicious of her. Mary tells Robin it was just a joke, and Robin tells everyone to realize that Cody has made these rules. Cody explains that Mary told Robin she was making these rules, and Robin got so defensive. So Mary said she was just kidding, and Cody says no, Mary wasn't kidding. Mary says she didn't have any idea that this was such a touchy subject with Robin and with Cody. Mary said she said this jokingly, and Mary says the fact that Cody doesn't get that she will defend Robin all day, every day, after a decade or more of knowing her is really sad. She says it's sad that Cody has absolutely no clue. Mary gave up her legal marriage to Cody for Robin so Cody could adopt her kids. Obviously, Mary is loyal to Robin. She's ride or die for Robin, but Robin isn't loyal to her, and neither is Cody. Mary barely made a joke, and now Cody and Robin are acting like she accidentally ran over their kitten. She was just being sarcastic. She was joking around a little bit. She wasn't serious. But Cody and Robin are not giving Mary any grace. After all she has done for them, she barely makes a tiny joke, and it hurts their egos so much that they now question her loyalty when she has proven her authenticity. She has proven her loyalty time and time again to Cody and Robin, but they haven't shown it back to Mary. Mary tells Robin she is so sorry, she was joking, and Cody tells Mary it's not about her. Cody says they have kids who have specifically blamed Robin. Kids who don't like the rules, who are specifically blaming Robin. Christine looks super fed up at this, and so does Janelle, because Cody is trying to call out all of their kids. Robin says there have been misunderstandings, and she has had to sit there and correct them. Robin says she had one of the kids actually call her and talk to her about, can't we loosen up the rules so we can see each other as a family? Asking her. And she told them, this is not her. She didn't make up these rules. And she very specifically pointed out that their dad, Cody, is not somebody to be run by one of his wives. Robin says she will just say out loud that she needs everybody to stop directing it her way if that's what is happening in their homes, with their kids, or whatever it is, because she can't have Ari and Saul stay 2 weeks away from Cody. So she is following the rules very closely, she tells Cody's wives. Not when Janelle brought her that gift in a box, Jeremy shipping box, by the way. Robin took that box directly inside without even wiping it down. Also the nanny. Her nanny at the only house Cody calls his house or our house, with the only kids Cody will refer to as our kids or my kids, was the point of exposure for the whole family. Yet Cody uses his wives' and kids' refusal to bend to his rules as an excuse to stay away for safety reasons and to shame them and deflect on them for why he can't be around. And he loves to shame them for their irresponsible ways in the face of this pandemic every chance he gets, when they all stayed clear of the Rona until the gathering at Robin's house because the nanny caught the Rona from her hubby and she was just at Robin's house a few days ago. Robin asks in confessional bitterly, why in the world would anybody think that she is somehow behind this? Why me? She asks dramatically. She says, they don't know who I am if they would think this of me, that I would try to cause some sort of disharmony in the family, as she feigns her almost in tears voice. This woman caused disharmony in the family the second she prioritized Cody and her relationship with Cody over the whole family. And then when Cody also prioritized her and made her the favorite wife, as the original 3 wives still had the same priority of the family when Robin entered the picture. Robin is a master manipulator. From day one, she began managing Cody and advising him on how to manage his wives. And she frames it as having emotional intelligence and helping the family communicate, when really Robin uses her understanding of emotions and communication as a way to get all the knowledge to be able to help Cody manipulate each relationship. And she whispers to Cody about how to handle things just right. They work together, although I'm sure she allows Cody to think he is the head and it's all his idea. Remember the honeymoon special? We decided to give them some of what they wanted. We, is he and Robin, decided to give them, his other wives, some of what they wanted. If Robin cared about the family dynamics, she would insist that all the wives got equal time and investment from Cody, the same as she gets. She would prioritize the family over herself and her relationship with Cody. She would not allow different standards for herself from the courtship to the marriage. Robin always got different standards than the other wives got in every stage of her relationship. If Robin truly cared about being fair and the family dynamics, she wouldn't have been cool with taking a honeymoon far longer and far more extravagant than any other wife got, because it wouldn't be fair to the other women that Cody is married to as well. It wouldn't be fair to take Cody from his kids for so long either. Robin isn't the victim, and Robin's selfishness and her manipulative behavior have largely contributed to facilitating Cody's shitty behavior as well. The original wives know Cody's behavior changed when his priorities shifted from the whole family, from the team, to himself and his individual relationship with Robin. And Robin encouraged and enabled that big time. Robin just said her kids can't be away from Cody for 2 weeks. But she doesn't seem to understand that Cody's other kids and wives have been away from him for over 6 months. And he barely even calls his kids regularly anymore. but she wants to complain about 2 weeks for her kids being way too much. It's too much for them to be away from Cody for that long. Cody says his kids are blaming Robin for making the rules. And Cody says these are the rules his doctor has given him. And these are the rules they're making their nanny abide by. And she has agreed to them, and Robin and the kids abide by them. So Cody wants the rest of the family to do this as well. Janelle says she can't. She just isn't opening that can of worms. But she says there is a lot of drama going on. Christine brought up the nanny to Cody because the kids have all brought it up to her. And if the nanny is the goal, Christine wonders what they can do in their home to make it so Isabel and Truly can hang out with their siblings. The rules say wear mask in public, sanitize hands after shopping, wash hands often, sanitize purchased products and groceries with alcohol wipes before placing inside house. See, Robin didn't do that one when Janelle brought that gift that was in a big shipping box. Remove shoes outside, change clothes after visiting shops, other homes, or businesses, and then only local family allowed in your home unless abiding by the rules. No eating at sit-down restaurants, only takeout is allowed. Limit shopping, use curbside pickup. There's more, but that's all I could make out. But already, Robin broke the rule, of course, of wiping down a package with alcohol before placing it inside her house, of course. So how important are the rules if Robin can't even play act at following them on camera? When Janelle gave her a box with a gift inside and she just put it in her house without wiping it down, that wasn't being rigid and following the rules. Janelle asks, where were these rules when she asked for months and months, how do we get together? She says nobody offered these up, and then all of a sudden the rules are being presented to her. And she says it's weird. Janelle says some of the rules are great, but clean mail with alcohol wipes, she asks in a flabbergasted tone. In confessional, Janelle says she is looking at these rules and she is astounded. She reads some of the rules that I just listed, and the rest that I haven't mentioned yet are 2-week quarantine after travel or having visitors, no movie theaters, bars, gyms, or restaurants, sanitizing hands, kids can see friends if maintaining 10 feet of social distance, and only for limited times, and clean mail with alcohol wipes. Janelle says there's the 10 billion commandments of Cody. Janelle tells Cody she has birthday presents for him and she guesses she will just leave them on his porch or something. Cody tells Janelle she can knock it or she can find a way. Cody asks in confessional, are you too lazy to do a few chores? He says all these are little chores. Excuse me. Is Cody too fucking lazy to go to his daughter's major surgery? Is Cody too emotionally lazy to have a decent relationship with anyone who doesn't cook him an ego feast all the time? Also, Cody accuses his wives of being too lazy, and maybe he should include the favorite wife too because she was lazy as well. She was too lazy to wipe down that sealed box that Janelle brought her. She just threw it in her house haphazardly with not a care in the world. And if she did that on camera, she does that regularly. That's my guess. So Robin probably doesn't follow these rules any more than anyone else. And the rules don't work even if they are followed because the nanny got sick. Christine doesn't think the rules are realistic at all for the real world. Robin doesn't see the rules as that hard to follow. Yeah, because she doesn't always follow them, like with Janelle's box. She didn't wipe that down. She tossed it in her house without even a second thought. The rules mean that Cody is in Robin's home. Mary is open to having a list of rules for Cody to come over. She says, smiling, if he wants to give me a list of rules, that she will follow those rules. And she starts cracking up because I think she knows she is trolling us hard. Christine asks Cody, so if they follow these rules in her house, will they be able to get together as a family for Christmas Day? She is looking directly at Robin as she asks this. She is addressing Robin, and Robin points to Cody with her arm. And Cody asks Robin, are you the head of the family? And Robin says no. Cody is super pissed that Christine addressed Robin specifically. Christine tells Cody she was just, and Cody interrupts her. Cody says it's pissing him off that his wives are looking to Robin for some kind of approval. He shouts like a maniac during confessional. He says, I don't have a head wife in this family. He says angrily, now I've had women try to be, all right? And he says he has had plenty of wives who have tried to be. And Cody is just mad because he knows, everyone knows, Robin manages him as the favorite wife. And she lets Cody think she obeys him and takes his lead. She feeds Cody's ego while doing all this. She allows Cody to believe she depends on him as she whispers in his ear, in my opinion. And Cody is pissed because the wives are looking to Robin for confirmation. And that shows he isn't the head. It's Robin. And everyone knows Robin calls the shots ultimately. And it upsets Cody that he isn't perceived as the head in control of his family. Everyone thinks it's Robin, even his wives. And he isn't mad they blame Robin about the COVID rules. He is mad everyone perceives that Robin has the ultimate power over Cody. And that hurts his ego big time. Let's remember, he's an alpha male. Because Cody, I think he's so butthurt because he knows, of course, it's true. Robin wears the pants. Robin cries in confessional. She says this is why it's so ridiculous to think she made up these rules. Because she knows Cody is like this. He isn't going to have a wife come in and try to tell him what to do. He just isn't. Cody is really disappointed with how this is all unfolding. Personally, he is feeling the depth of betrayal, and it's the biggest rift he has ever had in his family. Janelle doubts that even if everyone agreed on these rules and followed them, that they would get together as a family because she says Cody and Robin would be afraid that somebody was lying about following the protocols. Janelle says she is at her wit's end with this whole bullshit stuff in confessional. Christine says now that they have the rules in order to get back together as a family, she feels like they have to make a choice. Do they see Cody or do they do everything else? Cody tells the wives they have to take this list as seriously as they would religion and scripture. And he says you take it like a transparency and you lay it over your life and you see how it fits. Janelle tells Cody she doesn't think it will ever work for them to all get together as a family. Cody says, listen, these aren't the rules for him to be able to come to her house. Those are a different set of rules. These are just the rules for them to actually be able to still associate as a family. Janelle says in confessional, it's like she feels like Robin and Cody think she isn't doing anything, and they are doing everything the government tells them to do at Janelle's house. Christine says most people would look at that list and think it's absolutely insane to follow all of those rules. The camera does a close-up of Robin and she frowns. She has a very sour face as Cody's wives aren't really on board with this. And she kind of looks like Mr. Potato Head. She looks super constipated and she didn't like Christine saying that it's insane. Janelle says nobody is doing this at this level. They are doing a lot of the list, but not to that level. Robin points out that she has been doing this for 7 months. Well, isn't she the hero? Should we get her a sticker to put on her sticker chart for that? And also, she hasn't really been doing it too religiously. Let's remember about that shipping box Janelle gave her with her gift in it that she just threw in her house haphazardly without wiping it down. She didn't even think about wiping down Janelle's package, and she threw it in her house. And obviously, the protocols aren't working anyway if the nanny got sick. If this was Robin's normal behavior and she did this religiously and she followed these rules to the T all the time, 24/7, I think we can all agree she would have wiped down that box that Janelle gave her, especially on camera. So that just shows that Robin isn't doing this as rigidly as she says she is. Janelle says it would have been a mental health crisis for her. She would have had a huge problem doing it. Robin, the martyr, is in tears during confessional. She says she feels like she is making these sacrifices in order to protect them, in order to protect the family. Cody says bitterly in confessional that because Robin is on board with this, she gets blamed by the other wives for making the rules. Cody laughs cynically and he looks very unhinged and he says, like no woman would ever do what Cody wants. See, again, Cody just said it. He wants the women to blindly do what he wants. That's a dictatorship, not a democracy. If the Brown family were truly a fair democracy, Cody and Robin would be outvoted on how to handle COVID. But instead, Cody and Robin want to dictate the rules and impose them on everyone, and then deflect and blame everyone for not being a family because they aren't tolerating being controlled. This is utter bullshit. Christine can see why Robin follows the rules, because she needs to, because Cody is there every single day, all of the time. Christine says Cody isn't at her house, so they don't need to follow the protocols. Cody says they have to understand how he thinks. When the complaints are coming to him, he feels like it's an undermining of what he is trying to do. Christine explains she isn't trying to undermine him at all. She thinks she should be able to question his decisions. Christine says they're in a marriage, and if they can't bring things up that are frustrating without feeling like they're undermining, she says, God, doesn't that sound like a dictatorship, not a marriage? Exactly. That's exactly what it is. Christine says she has a lot of unladylike words going on in her mind, so she is trying to filter it out a little bit. Robin says, here it is. Cody has written it down. Just wipe off your packages, she explains frustratedly in confessional. Again, I know it's repetitive, but we know she doesn't do so, and now she wants to act like she can't understand why the other wives can't do it when she doesn't even do it every time herself because she is a hypocrite herself. She says, just change your clothes when you come in from being out in town. Clean your groceries, whatever it is, so they can all see each other. Robin is frustrated. Mary asks, can we just all get along in her confessional scene? Janelle says her opinion is that some of this is way over the top, but she will do it for Christmas so they can be together as a family. Cody says if this became normal, then they will be able to be a normal family. They will never behave like a normal family with Cody there because Cody doesn't behave like a normal human being, in my opinion. Cody doesn't behave like a normal husband would. Cody doesn't behave like a normal father would. Cody wants to dictate his abnormal way of doing things on everyone just so he can feel he is the head, that he's in control. This is all about control for Cody and finding a way to live the way that he prefers and finding a way to justify it, to try and put the blame on the rest of his family rather than putting the accountability on himself. Cody is deciding to do this way, is choosing to be so all or nothing about it. He is the one being so rigid and unbending. And again, COVID going through the whole family would be far less damaging than any of this domineering, controlling bullshit and Cody shoving his protocols down everyone's throat when it clearly doesn't even work. It's not practical. He and his wife are hypocrites of the highest order. If they regularly followed this list, Robin would have definitely wiped down that package as sure as she hopefully brushes her teeth each morning. So all of this is bullshit. And Cody has done more damage with his controlling ways and the way he handled protecting them from COVID than getting COVID would actually ever do in the family. Janelle tells Cody she has adult children in her house that have different things going on. And Cody says he is just saying that he would like to be able to see her and their kids and all of their kids together more. In confessional, Cody says maybe this mistake of he and Janelle not being romantic enough, maybe that's a big mistake and maybe they should be more romantic. He says the fact that Janelle is choosing the boys over him, maybe it's just mothering, nurturing, but these are adults who are supposed to be men. He says they are adults. Wow. So Cody is thinking that if maybe Janelle got more sex from him, then maybe she would be persuaded to pick Kotex over her kids. When Cody behaves like a coward with no balls, the last thing any of his wives, other than the favorite, will want is sex from him. He's repulsive. I doubt he's anything to write home about in bed. He seems like the selfish type who expects his wives to give when he probably refuses to give to them himself, because he probably doesn't like to do that. He's probably selfish with the level of ego and the assertions of being an alpha male. One could only guess why he behaves in such an insecure manner, perhaps. Maybe there's a reason why he feels he should constantly assert his manhood. I think Cody is jealous of his kids and the attention they get from their moms. His ego is hurt that his wives would pick their kids over him, when a mother should always put their kids first. In what world should Kotex come first? It actually hurts Cody's ego that his wives prioritize his own kids over him. He puts down his boys, saying they're adults and they should be men and they don't act like men, more or less, and their mom is too nurturing. Cody has some amazing kids. He has some very mature sons that eclipse him as far as their looks, their intellect, their emotional intelligence, their communication, and their self-awareness. They're already far more mature than him, and they are more grateful and more humble, and they understand sacrifice and unconditional love. Cody's sons are men, and he should be very proud of them. Cody's sons are way better examples of men than Cody could ever be. Look at Hunter. Hunter, Janelle's son, did not have to drive 3 hours back and forth and quarantine for 2 weeks to see Isabel and be there for her. But he made the sacrifice. He prioritized his sister. He didn't shame her, saying she will have an ugly scar. He told her she was tall and beautiful and her scars are badass. And that's what a real man does. He shows up for his family when they need him. Garrison has a shirt business, among other things, and he was able to save for a house in his 20s. That's a man. That's a successful man. And look at Gabe. Gabe works. Gabe does school. Gabe has his girlfriend. And Gabe loves his family. He loves his mama. And you can tell he tried talking to his dad rationally. He tried pleading with him. He expressed wanting a relationship with his dad, who barely called him during his monogamous staycation with Robin during the pandemic. And all Cody did during this conversation with his son was resent and blame and deflect. He deflected the blame for why he didn't come around and why his relationships with his kids were failing on his wives, on the moms of the kids, and on his kids themselves. Cody is jealous of his sons, in my opinion, and he is jealous because he knows his sons are better men than he is. And to put his sons down, who are doing amazing things, who he should be proud of in his own arrogance just because his ego hurts, that his kids take precedence over him for his wives, that's really effed up and that's really cruel. Cody tries to call his sons immature, hint that they aren't men, when he will never be the men they are. Could Cody buy a house in his 20s? Could Cody discuss his emotions and communicate and be as self-aware as Gabe? Even if Janelle was getting it from Cody, no amount of mediocre sex will ever persuade her to prioritize Cody over her own kids. That was absolutely ridiculous of Cody to say or to even think, that if they had a more romantic relationship, it would be different. He really has something wrong with him, in my opinion, where he sees everything as a game to be won or lost or manipulated to try and get what he wants. Cody is so bitter. His ego is so dented that he wants to insult his kids when he should be praising them as their father. His kids are doing beautifully, and instead he wants to criticize. He wants to criticize a mother for doing what she should do in prioritizing her kids, all because he's upset he isn't everyone's first priority and he isn't obeyed blindly. Cody is completely negative. Just watching him on TV is annoying and stressful AF. Imagine how it would feel to be in this man's presence. Imagine how his kids feel around him and how his wives feel. Maybe if Cody had a better character and a better personality, the family would be more willing to humor his bullshit. But why should they even try when they know it's a nightmare to be in his presence? No one is going to jump through hoops just to walk on eggshells. And why should they? When Cody calls his family an obstacle to his goals in life, why would they want to even see him at all? Also notice, Cody criticizes that Janelle over-nurtures her adult sons. But Robin is still a helicopter mom to all her kids, including the 3 adults who still live at home. And Cody never, ever says a word about Robin over coddling her kids. Janelle says the separation has been hard on them, but she is more attached than she ever has been. And every year she gets more attached to Cody. Janelle feels like she and Cody have a pretty good relationship. For her, it's just about the rules and having to choose between being with her kids and being with the rest of the family. And Janelle clarifies she will choose the kids every time. No matter how much she loves Cody, she will always choose her kids. Aspen and Mitch have invited Christine and her family to go visit them for Thanksgiving. And she is going to go there because they invited Tony and McKelty and Peyton. So she is going to go there, and she tells Cody it's not a threat, but they need to have a family sit-down Thanksgiving dinner. In confessional, Christine says part of her loves the idea of escaping the whole COVID thing, and she wants to just go to Aspen and Mitch's house, and it sounds good to have a great Thanksgiving there. Robin confirms with Janelle that she won't be there for Thanksgiving. And Robin asks Christine, and Christine says the kids are dying to go see Aspen and Mitch, McKelty, Tony, and Peyton. And they will all be there, so Christine is going to go there. And Cody asks if this is to be continued or if they will all decide on Thanksgiving now. Janelle knows she won't be here, but she will give the rules to everybody so that they can attend Christmas. Christine will talk to the girls about Thanksgiving. Robin tells Mary she hasn't said a lot, and Mary says she doesn't usually have much to say. Robin asks Mary what she thinks about everything, and Mary says a lot of this conversation doesn't have anything to do with her. Robin adds that she and Mary have been sitting here waiting for the time when Mary will be able to come over. And Mary confirms she already has been doing all of these things. She's been staying home, quarantining, living in a permanent lockdown, staying away in the hopes of being able to go to Robin's house. So she will just keep doing these protocols and she will just keep waiting to be invited over. Christine says when Mary said that she has been following these rules and that she has been in her house alone, her heart went out to Mary, and she has no idea how Mary can stay sane. Janelle says of Mary that it must be very quiet and very lonely at Mary's house. Mary says it's actually been frustrating to her because she wants to interact with Robin, and she knows that Robin is quarantining and she is doing the same thing, and still they don't get to interact, and it's frustrating to her. Cody tells Mary he thinks she is doing it, and he asks her if she wants to come over and see the kids. Mary tells Cody she knows she's been doing it, and she has been telling that to Cody, and she has been telling that to Robin, but they have told her it's not time yet, even though she has been eager to come over. Robin says, no, that's not what she said. She said that she told Mary that Cody has to make the decision, and she doesn't know how that will blow over with the whole family if she and Mary are interacting and nobody else is. Cody guesses now that Robin and Mary can schedule a play date. Cody chuckles and he asks Mary, "You have been wanting to play with Ari and Saul, right?" Why are they treating Mary like a kid who only wants to play with their kids? She also wants to see Cody and Robin. She just wants human interaction. And it's kind of cruel the way Cody chuckles and belittles her, like he will allow her the privilege to come over and play with his kids, since she has been so obedient. It's so mean almost. Mary says she just doesn't understand why they didn't have the conversation earlier. And she knows that Robin talks to Cody about this. So that's why she doesn't understand why they haven't done this sooner and why she wasn't invited over sooner. Because Robin doesn't give a fuck how Mary feels. Robin doesn't really care if the rest of the wives will be pissed. She doesn't want Mary there, or Mary would have been invited. This is manipulation, like since Mary has isolated herself and suffered for months, finally she can come. I actually think Robin doesn't want her to come. She's not enthusiastic about it, but Cody probably feels some type of shame, so he invited Mary in front of Robin, and now Robin has to follow through with it. Robin is only there for Robin. Robin is only there for Mary when she needs things from her. Like when Mary was getting a divorce and giving up her legal status so that Robin could be the legal wife. They were close back then, and as soon as that was done, Robin suggested things like maybe Mary should burn her marriage certificate, and she stopped coming around. Now, this upcoming season, suddenly, Robin is over at Mary's house in the trailer because she needs her. Mary is of use to Robin now. Robin isn't really Mary's friend. It's a one-sided relationship for Robin when Mary wholeheartedly loves Robin and her family, and it's very fucked up. Christine asks in confessional if Mary is following these rules, why isn't she hanging out with Robin? Why aren't the two of them getting together? Because Robin doesn't need anything from Mary right now, and she doesn't actually care about Mary's well-being. Robin is only a friend when she benefits or she needs things, and I think Christine knows that. Christine says everyone can follow all the rules for 2 weeks before Christmas, and then Christmas will work out. Cody doesn't think that they're going to have a family Thanksgiving together. It will be whoever is here Thanksgiving together. Robin says it's made her feel like the foundation that their family was built on is crumbling. Cody says it's a sad reality for him about where he is at in some of his marriages. He says that kind of lack of loyalty isn't good for a marriage 5, 10, or 15 years from now. He says that's going to be really hard for them. Cody accuses his wives of a lack of loyalty, but look at what he did to Christine about Utah, throwing her under the bus in front of the group. Look how he couldn't be loyal to Christine as his wife and to Isabel as his daughter. He couldn't be there when he needed them the most. Cody doesn't know a thing about being loyal. He isn't loyal to anyone but himself ultimately. But he wants to claim his wives aren't loyal to him after all they sacrificed to marry him and to live like this. Cody really needs to go get beep. Also, 5, 10, or 15 years from now, how many of his wives does Cody think will stick around that long if he continues to behave like he is mentally unwell, domineering, and unstable, only in my opinion, of course. No one really wants to be around Cody other than Robin, really, and of course Mary would jump at the chance, but Cody won't give her that chance. Christine says home is just hard right now. It's hard to be home. She says that she and Cody are in a tough spot and she doesn't want to be around that often. In fact, it hurts to be home. It's easier to leave. She asks, you know what COVID has brought out in our family? It's how much they want to be a family or not. After Cody and the wives leave, Robin goes back to talk to Mary. Robin asks Mary if they are okay, and she says they are, and they hug. Mary cries, and Robin tells her they need to schedule a play date. They finally get to be with each other, Robin says. And Robin starts sobbing too, and she says in confessional, she forgot herself, she forgot the rules, and she just hugged Mary. Robin says she will be all right, she will put it in God's hands, because she knows this relationship with Mary is more important. Aren't all the relationships in the family more important than catching COVID or following Cody's insane protocols? Mary is in tears. She asks Robin why she waited so damn long. She asks why they didn't have this conversation before. And Robin says she didn't want everybody getting mad that Mary would be allowed over and they wouldn't be allowed over. Robin tells Mary to stop acting like it was her choice. Ultimately, it was her choice. Cody told Robin weeks ago that Mary was okay, that Mary was safe when they were doing the family barbecue. And Robin hesitated. And now Robin is using this bullshit excuse that she didn't want the family to get mad that Mary was welcome over when they weren't allowed, when really no one would give a flying fuck. Robin knows it's her choice, and she is doing this big show to try and make herself out to be the sensitive one, backed into a corner with her hands tied, unable to invite Mary over because of Cody, when we know during the family barbecue episode, Cody suggested that Mary could be with the kids and that Mary was safe. And Robin was concerned, she says, if it was okay and if the other kids or the wives will get mad should she invite Mary over. No one cares. I think Robin is doing this because she herself doesn't trust Mary. She doesn't want Mary around. If Robin wanted Mary invited over, Mary would be invited over. Robin doesn't care that Mary was waiting by the phone and harming her own state of mind and mental health by being so lonely and isolated, living from her house, staying away from people, following Cody's protocols to the T. She was waiting by the phone basically to be able to see Robin and to see the kids. Why? Why did Robin allow Mary to feel this way if she is like her sister and her sister wife? Because Robin didn't need anything from Mary, so then it's an inconvenience to her to have Mary around because it's a one-sided friendship. Robin is only Mary's sister when she needs stuff from her. She plays Mary like a fiddle. Mary tells Robin she wasn't pointing the finger at her when she made that joke. And Robin says she wasn't trying to do this. Mary explains to Robin she was totally joking with her. And Robin says she knows, but it's so real. Mary thought it was funny because Cody was giving Robin a list of rules that she obviously already follows. And Mary thought it was silly for Cody to give her a list. Robin says it took her a minute to understand that Mary was joking. Robin says there are rumors that somehow she is pulling the strings here. And Robin says that's the most hilarious thing in the world because she asks Mary, have you ever known Cody to let a wife sit and pull strings to this point with this kind of craziness? Robin answers her own question. She says no. She says Cody is his own man. She says she could not have pulled this off, this strictness. And she does her cry voice again, and she says she always wanted Mary to be able to come over and to be around the kids. She just didn't want everybody upset if they were doing something against the set rules or whatever. Mary says she still doesn't understand why she wasn't allowed over. And Robin says because everyone was following these rules, and if she and Mary were not following them, as far as interaction with each other, then people in the family would feel like it was unfair. But a rule on the list that Cody gave all his wives said specifically, only local family allowed in your home unless abiding by the rules. So Mary and Robin were local family, and they both abided by the rules. So per the rules, it's allowed. And Cody blessed it months ago. Robin is now making a bullshit excuse that it's because of the rules and the family being upset with Mary allowed over when they were not allowed over. But really, no one would care. That's a bullshit excuse about why Mary wasn't invited over. And I think Mary wasn't invited over because Robin didn't really want her there, or she would be invited over. If this is really about the rules, per the rules, Mary is permitted. It wasn't about the rules. It wasn't about Cody. It wasn't about the other wives getting pissed that they were not allowed at Robin's house. Even Christine said she was shocked that Mary was alone this whole time and that Mary wasn't invited to interact over at Robin's. She was sad for Mary, and she wouldn't have minded if Mary had company at Robin's house. And Janelle would not mind. In fact, Christine and Janelle were getting together separately with their kids throughout the whole pandemic. So I think that Christine knows it's fucked up, Janelle knows it's fucked up, and Mary knows it's fucked up too. And if Robin was such a sensitive empath, there is no way in hell she would let Mary, her sister wife, who's like a sister to her, feel isolated and alone for so long when she was following the rules, and Robin was too. There is no reason why Mary wasn't allowed over other than Robin not inviting her because she did not want to. I think Mary knows that this is a bullshit excuse, and it's very cruel and insensitive of Robin to do. Even Cody, who isn't Mary's biggest fan, said invite her, she's fine. Robin is the one who didn't want it, and she is the one who made the bullshit excuse about people in the family getting pissed when I don't think anyone would give a fuck. They all know how alone and lonely Mary is. They would welcome that she had company. Robin doesn't seem to follow the rules as stringently as she suggests. She doesn't seem to follow them too much. She hugged Mary. She didn't wipe down Janelle's box that Janelle brought. So if it's really about the rules, Robin doesn't seem to care that much unless it suits her and Cody and what they want and how they want to live. This is utter bullshit. Remember when Robin gave Mary the sisters figurine at Christmas and they cried together? Would a sister let a sister feel alone and lonely and isolated and depressed when just having her over would alleviate her loneliness? Robin allowed Mary to feel that way. She allowed Mary to feel lonely. She allowed Mary to feel alone and sad and isolated, alone in her house. Mary sacrificed everything for her in divorcing Cody to give Robin her legal wife status. And Robin can't even do this for her. Robin calls Mary a sister and she gives her that stupid sister's figurine. But in a difficult time when Mary really needs Robin, she really isn't there for Mary. She couldn't inconvenience herself just to humor Mary and make her feel a little better just because she didn't want to. And that says a ton about Robin's character. And this, I could never pull the strings. How could they think I could do that? Listen, Robin regularly pulls the strings while making Cody believe he is the one in charge. Remember the Utah thing? Robin advised Cody not to tell Christine what her sister wives said about the move. She coached Cody on how to deliver the news. And notice Cody followed Robin's instructions to a T. And when Christine and Cody talked about the Utah move, Christine asked Cody what her sister wives said specifically about it, and Cody refused to tell her. He deflected and said instead he would like to convince her that she could be happy staying in Flagstaff. Robin probably holds most of the strings with a lot of the big decisions in the Brown family. Nothing gets to the other wives before it goes through her first, I would guess. Why did the Browns move to Vegas? Was it because her dad worked in Vegas? Why did the Browns decide to move to Flagstaff out of the blue? Was it maybe because Dayton, Robin's special needs adult son, got accepted into college there? So Robin can play meek and stuck with Cody's ways, but in the end, he gets to feel like the head with Robin, but she is that big bulging neck that turns the head this way and that. The way Robin treats Mary is very transactional. When Robin needs things, like when she needed that marriage certificate, for example, after she got it, she dropped Mary, and she even suggested maybe Mary should burn her marriage certificate. when Mary so graciously and selflessly divorced Cody legally just so he could adopt Sabin's kids. It's something very sentimental to Mary and very painful and difficult for her. And before the ink was even dry on those papers, Robin got busy with her life and she moved on. She didn't include Mary as much. She didn't support her and check on her after she got what she wanted. Robin had no more fucks to give. Robin only has fucks to give if she needs something from you. Like next season, for example, when she is sitting at Mary's door, begging her to stick in with this to help her rebuild the family. Robin says in confessional that Cody was telling her he thinks that she and Mary are very careful and he thinks she can have Mary over. And Robin told him that's a change in protocol, and if Cody is going to change the protocol, then he needs to tell everybody. And Cody told her it was fine because he said it was fine. Cody told Robin since she and Mary are being very careful, they can see each other. And Robin is the one who felt that's not fair. So all of a sudden, being fair to the whole family is more important than Mary feeling depressed and lonely and alone and isolated. Robin doesn't care about things being fair. She got different standards to the other wives in her courtship, in her engagement, her wedding, her marriage, her honeymoon, and Robin still gets more time and investment from Cody than anyone else in the family. She never cared about being fair before or about abiding by the same standards as the other wives during her courtship process and all of that. And Robin came up with a million reasons to justify why she was entitled to different treatment and why she got different treatment, why she was entitled to more than the other wives got. She didn't care if it was fair for Cody to spend almost 2 weeks alone with her 24/7, away from his wives and all of his kids, when his wives just got 3 or 4 day road trips lazily thrown together as an afterthought, and she got a honeymoon in paradise. She didn't care that Dayton had Cody there for his minor eye procedure, yet Cody refused to go to Isabel's major scoliosis surgery in order to not be away from her and the kids for too long, even though Isabel will remember this all of her life, and Solinari probably won't remember how long Cody was gone. Robin didn't care that she was the only wife whose dress Cody picked for the wedding, or that she got a nanny when Christine requested help while caring for at least 7 kids at a time. She cared for her kids and Janelle's kids, and she was overwhelmed. And Cody told Christine there was no help for her, and she needed to hold up her end of the deal. So Robin only cares about appearing to be fair if it suits her and if it justifies what she wants. In my opinion, Robin tells Mary her kids ask about her all the time. Mary tells Robin that she's glad she has her kids and that she has Cody. Mary is sobbing, and Robin tells Mary she didn't know what to do. She says Cody is so strict. There are so many rules. And this is the first time Cody is actually talking about it, going, okay, maybe this can happen. Not true. This isn't the first time. At the barbecue, Cody told Robin Mary was okay. Mary was safe to be invited over. Mary was safe to interact with the kids. And Robin said she didn't know about it, and that was months ago. So now Robin wants to shift the blame on Cody like it was out of her hands to invite her over, when it was really Robin who probably didn't want Mary around. So Robin knew Mary was approved by Cody, and she didn't invite her knowing how lonely and isolated Mary was after Mary did so much for her. She knew Cody approved it. And Robin says now everybody sees what they can do to be together, and now they can be together because she knows Mary is following these rules too. Mary has been following these rules for half a year, hoping for an invite. And Robin knew Mary was safe and following the protocols. So it's not about COVID or fear or fairness. Robin just doesn't give a fuck. She doesn't need anything from Mary at the moment. She doesn't really care about Mary's feelings. It's not a genuine sisterhood. Robin doesn't need anything from Mary right now, so she waited to invite her. But wait till next season when Robin does need Mary for stuff all of a sudden. Then they're going to be sisters, and we're going to hear Robin gush about the sisters' relationship, I'm sure. Mary is glad that Robin came back to talk about stuff. She is glad that Robin is okay with her because Mary really doesn't like it when Robin isn't okay with her. Robin says she loves Mary and she hates that Mary is alone. She wants Mary to be happy. She says if she could wave a magic wand that she had say over what was going on, she would make it so that Mary was happy and so that Mary and Cody could figure their stuff out. But she can't, and she cannot express enough how hard it is to be in a plural family where the husband and his other wife are having a problem, and it completely affects her own life, but she is supposed to stay out of it and she has no say. She says the lines are hard between their different marriages because you have to respect that another wife has her own relationship with Cody, but at the same time, their relationship affects her relationship with Cody. And right now, Robin says she is living right through that because Cody is having issues with some of his other relationships. And it is making her relationship with Cody really, really hard. I understand how in that dynamic, when one wife and the husband have issues, it affects the other relationships as well. But Robin is in no position to complain about how hard it is for her that Cody doesn't have a good relationship with his other wives and then it's affecting her, when obviously she is the favorite wife. And at this time that she is saying this, she is living monogamously with Cody. Robin says it's not her place to interfere with the other marriages, but she clearly does. In the honeymoon episode, that famous line, "We decided to give them some of what they want." Why are Robin and Cody deciding together what Cody will give each wife in his separate relationships? What Cody will say to each wife, how he will speak to her, what he will do to manage her? Why is Cody discussing the details of his other marriages with Robin? And why are they deciding together how Cody will move and behave and act and what he will communicate to them? So Robin might say it's not her place, but she makes it her place from day one because she wants to be in control. She wants all the information and she wants to assist Cody in managing everything in the family, in my opinion. That's why she got so involved in the Browns' communication, because then she gets to be the go-to to mediate and she can have all the information to be able to manipulate things to her ends and to her convenience if need be, in my opinion. Anyways, that does it for this episode. I'll be back this week for the next episode of my Sister Wives Rewatch on Season 16, Episode 7, Choosing Kids Over Cody. And next week, I'll conclude the full Season 16 playlist with Season 16, Episode 8, 2 Clicks. And of course, I'll cover the next episode of Seeking Sister Wife and the premiere of Season 17 of Sister Wives. It's over next week. To my YouTube viewers, please like and subscribe and let me know your thoughts on all things Sister Wives if you like. Thanks for listening. See you soon. Bye.